Hello folks, we're back to the classic background. How nice is that? How nice is that? Yes, it is time to talk about Games Workshop and their retail side of the business. As most of you know, I worked for Games Workshop for a few years in the retail department first as a staff body, as somebody just walking around the shop who is basically working for the shop, you know, as a red shirt or a blue shirt as it was when I was working there, and then as a store manager for GW. And yeah, that's basically what I did. I was there for a little while during my career before I went back into teaching, and came away with some very unique experiences and stories and memories from that time that basically the original part of this channel was built upon. It's built upon me just talking about things that happened to me at Games Workshop and other people talking to me about what happened to them at Games Workshop and the experiences that they had working for the retail chain. What I will say before we get into this video is that working in any retail job is high stress. It's go, high stress, especially during the holidays. So I'm not all woe is me about it. I'm not all like, you know, isn't it terrible? No, working retail sucks, and it doesn't really matter where you do it. I'm not a kind of person who holds Games Workshop to a higher standard than every other high street store, because that would be unrealistic. But I'm the kind of person who likes to say you should practice what you preach, and I've not really experienced that from Games Workshop from time to time, but there has been a really good video that you guys have been sending me constantly over the past few days, and I basically have to cover it now. It is by Filmdeg Miniatures, so thank you very much, Filmdeg, for putting this on here. I've been saving this. Boom! I have subscribed. There you go, to Filmdeg Miniatures, and you should subscribe too, because he keeps doing these really cool interviews with ex-Games Workshop staff. Hasn't invited me yet. Cheeky sod. But yeah, he's done this with lots of ex-Games Workshop staff who are very big names. So he's had people like Rick Priestley, Andy Chambers, Jervis Johnson, and of course now John Stallard, who have been on his channel. How he's done this, I'd love to have a chat with Filmdeg to know how he knows all of these people, or how he got them on his channel. Because if it was just a case of just like sending an email, that's going to really annoy me. But anyway, let's turn the music off. What we're going to do is we're going to watch the video together, and I'm going to comment on it as we go, essentially, right? All right, let's jump in. John Stallard is the ex-head of Games Workshop Retail. So he was head of Games Workshop Retail before my time too. I never worked under John Stallard. He was way before my time. He was at Warlord Games by the time I worked for the company. But some of his takes are very interesting to talk about. So let's have a little jump in. Thank you to Filmdeg Miniatures. Link to his channel is in the description down below. Please go subscribe to him. And let's jump in.
Well, hi Tom, what do you want to know?
Oh God, I suppose you could talk to me about your time as working in Games Workshop Retail, kind of.
Crikey, that was a long time ago now, but I'm going to throw my mind back a long time ago when I was.
Yeah, when did you start?
Oh, I would have been 25, and I'm now 64, so a long time ago. But yeah, I joined Games Workshop and I worked in trade sales first of all in mail order for a long time, under the great tutelage of Mr. Rick Priestley, who taught me everything I know. And then in the trade sales department, opening up Ma and Pa stores all around Britain. And that was great fun.
All right, so before we go anywhere else, this is basically the bog standard Games Workshop, shall we say, career. What Games Workshop like to do is they love to take people from the street, and then they, not literally, but from outside the company, and they would rather you stay in the company and they hire you for different roles than hire somebody new. That is something that they've always liked to do. They like to mold you like a piece of clay. They will get you in as like as John was here. He was basically a mail order troll. He was packing packages. That's what he was doing, right? And he eventually started to move into different places and was getting saddled with more and more responsibility. Again, same thing happened to me. Started as a part-time staff body, into a full-time staff body, then to a part-time manager and a full-time manager, right? And they go on from there. If I'd have stayed in the company, I might have gone into another part of the company, maybe the studio or maybe somewhere else, because you apply for things in-house and they will always look at your application with more favour than somebody from outside the company. General good practice, that they like to look after their people, which is great. It does kind of lead to nepotism sometimes. One thing I have seen is that it leads to Games Workshop thing. And what I mean by that is you're not getting any new ideas coming into the company. You're getting the same ideas, the same people coming up in the same positions all the time. And somebody becomes a fixture for a good 20, 25, 30, 35 years, right? And that's fine if they're really good at their job, but if they're just moving from job to job to job to job in the company because they're liked, that is now a cult of personality. You're not employing the best person for the job. You're employing your mate because, isn't Dave a good old lad, right? We're going to get him a job in the studio, or we're going to shuffle him off to do something over here. I saw many managers who would upset customers and eventually, tank the store. They would move on to different places in the company because they were liked, and they weren't sacked. They were liked. They went somewhere else. So, it can lead to negative stuff. It's a double-edged sword, but this is the typical Games Workshop career here that John's had, essentially.
I learnt a lot there as well. And then Brian Ansell, the great dark-winged avenging lord of chaos.
So Brian Ansell, for those of you who don't know, is not one of the founders of Games Workshop. I think he came in at just after, literally, and as a business partner to the guys who originally founded, Ian Livingston and Steve Jackson. He came in as basically a partner to them and ended up taking over the company eventually. I think it was a leveraged management buyout. Can't really remember. Or was that Kirby? Can't remember. One of the two. But anyway, he was somebody who was basically running Games Workshop for quite a while. If you have a thing in your head of good old red and yellow Games Workshop, with big blister packs and TV advertisements and things like that, before we had... we're only going to sell, Warhammer and all that. That was this guy's, Ansell's Games Workshop. It was Kirby's Games Workshop that moved things away from D&D and other games and onto Warhammer itself, and that's it. And became far more corporate under him. So Ansell wasn't that guy. He was more of a mar and pop, as John just said, in terms of the stores. But anyway, moving on.
Called me into his office and said,
I reminded a little bit, sorry.
A lot there as well. And then Brian Ansell, the great dark-winged avenging lord of chaos, called me into his office and said, would you like to be head of retail? So in a blind panic, I said, well, no. I said, I've never worked on a store in my life. And he said, well, it's quite easy. There's nothing to it. And I said, well, no, I don't think I'd like that. He said, well, you could open up lots of stores. I said, yeah, but you fire all the heads of retail. He just gave me his Brian Ansell grin. He said, well, I wouldn't fire you. I said, well, you might. And so I had to go and sleep on it and then think whether I really did fancy being head of retail for Games Workshop. At the time, they probably had 10, 12 stores. They were in Leeds and York and Manchester, Dowling Road, of course, famously, Glasgow and Edinburgh, Bristol, as I remember. So that's a few of them anyway. But then they were what you call classically proper game stores, in that you could buy Trivial Pursuits in there. Sure. Citadel Miniatures, yes. Games Workshop products, yes. Dungeons and Dragons, for sure. But then really weird stuff like water pistols and kites and Yahtzee and chess, Go, even including Ouija boards, for God's sake.
Jesus.
Not a thing you really want to take home to your...
So you can see here the old catalogue back in the day. So back in the day, a lot of you will know this, some of you may not. The way you did mail order is that you would send Games Workshop your order in the mail. You'd tell them what you wanted, and you'd give them your money, and then they would send you the model. Yeah, it was very ghetto back then. It was very ghetto before the internet. But that's what they used to do. They used to just do it that way. And you can see here the different, obviously you got Citadel Miniatures first and foremost there, but you got Fantasy Specials, Ral Parther, all these other Wizards, Wargaming and Warriors and Warlocks, all these different places that you can get your models from. all from the same place. So pretty cool. Very different business back then, extremely different. And a lot of these guys, I'm really grateful for what FilmDeg is doing, because unfortunately, eventually, next 10, 20 years, we're going to start losing these guys. Sorry, John. Sorry. Didn't mean to, like, do... Have you ever seen this and be like, a little sod? No. You know what I mean, though. You know what I mean? In the next 30, 40 years, we'll lose the Rick Priestleys, the Andy Chambers, the John Stallards, all these, your John Blanches, all these guys who are a touchstone of what Games Workshop used to be. Hopefully their influence will live on in Warlord games and other things that they've made, but still, it's good that he's doing this, because we're getting to see the touchstone. One thing that I really was disappointed with, and I don't want to be a negative Nancy, is the new Games Workshop White Dwarf 50 Years of Games Workshop celebration. It touched on the history of Games Workshop, but I was hoping it was going to be a warts and all editorial of the history of the company, some anecdotes, and lots of really fun things. But it was nothing really. There was nothing really there. They didn't get Rick Priestley in. They didn't get Andy Chambers in. Anyone who basically had a real... They used anecdotes from other people's interviews from years ago. From Ian Livingston and people like that. Which really sucks, because I wanted to hear from the dudes. Get him back in for one night only. Bring back Rick Priestley to write an article on White Dwarf. Bring back, just for one only. It's a 50-year thing. They didn't do that. So it's really important that we watch videos like this and we absorb the information, because these are your touchstones from what Games Workshop actually used to be. It is an English institution. It is a British institution over here. So, celebrate it.
Mum and Dad. So it was this really weird, eclectic mix of just weird stuff. So that's what we had to work with. So what Brian wanted, obviously, is for us to sell more Games Workshop stuff, because the margins you make on that are so much better, because we're making it ourselves, you make more profit. Bringing stuff over from America, things like RuneQuest, TSR, or Bunnies and Burrows, for God's sake, the margins are quite slim on that. So
I got that wrong then. I assumed it was Kirby who did that. But it was actually Ansel, so there you go. I was wrong on that. So yeah, he started the process of moving away from other games and bringing it into only being Warhammer, which is okay, cool.
We had to get the stores up and becoming like what now looks like Games Workshop shops. So that's where I stepped in, and that was what I had to do as a job. So the first thing we had to do was get all the store managers aligned, and so I had to move a couple of those guys on who didn't particularly want to run the stores in a new way.
Yeah, sure. So there would have been different mindsets.
It was a bit of a chat. I mean, there's one of them who insisted on sitting in a large leather armchair behind the counter. He just wouldn't get out of the armchair. I said, no, you can't sit in a chair all day. He said, well, I think you'll find I'm going to. I had to say, well, I think you'll find you're not going to.
Yeah.
So that was a free...
Okay, so here's the thing on this. Sorry, my cat is actually scratching on the door as we're talking, but he's not coming in because I'm waxing lyrical. I'm in full flow. Here's the thing. What he just described there, I've seen happen, right? And we're only hearing it from John's perspective. That's the issue here. I'm pretty sure the manager in this example will have a different opinion on what happened and what transpired. Things are very rarely this cut and dry of I'm the good guy in the story and that guy was the bad guy in the story. No, normally it's somewhere in between. The amount of times I saw this Games Workshop do it happened to me, where a trainer, somebody in John's position, what John's done, he's gone round to a store and he's trying to re-educate or train the store manager to do his store in a different way. And those who aren't towing the party line are then let go. Fair enough, right? You run your business how you want to run it. And obviously it worked, because Games Workshop did very, very well after that. Thing is, you catch more flies with honey than bile. And I've seen this happen. Like, it happened with my trainer. Like, he'd come in, and for the first few weeks, things were great. And he was training me really well, had a lot of fun. And then One or two things. I've gone into it ad nauseum on the channel back in the day. Basically, I went to a training event and I didn't have my t-shirt. Didn't have my Games Workshop t-shirt, right? Because I'd never been to one of these events before. I've never been in a corporate setting before. I don't know what's going on, right? I've just turned up to Nottingham in nice clothes, in nice smart casual clothes. Like I'm not there dressed like in a hoodie. And he's asked, where's your Games Workshop stuff in the morning? And I'm like, well, I didn't realise we had to take it. I didn't even know what this was. I thought it was training with like 5 or 6 lads. I didn't realise it would be everybody in retail. So he went and got me another t-shirt, and I went, oh, well, cheers. And I was talking to somebody higher up than him, right? It turns out. I didn't know this at the time. I kind of did. I was getting the vibe. And I said, oh, cheers, mate. Yeah, thank you so much. And I went back to talk to the guy I was talking to. And he got really offended by this and said, listen, no, put it on now. This is ridiculous. And I was like, whoa. Okay, all right, sorry. I'll just, okay, no worries. And I put it on. So you basically embarrassed me in front of somebody who was much higher up than us in the company. And I put it on, no problem. And I wasn't rude to him at all. Like, he came over, and I was like, oh, thank you so much for that, mate. Thank you so much. I'll catch up with you in a minute. Thank you so much. Turned round, continued, and not even turned round, just continued speaking to the guy I was speaking to, because I didn't want to be rude. And then he then shouted at me basically in front of him. From that moment on, and I dropped that. I was like, okay, well, it happens. Maybe we got our wires crossed there. It happens. And the next time he comes to my store, he makes a point of coming to my store that like the next week, which is really strange. Like he shouldn't have, he had no business being there the next week. Basically, it was fine. And he was sitting in my store, and he basically talked to me like I was a 5-year-old, and he really browbeat me about how rude I was to him. And I was just like, I'm sorry, like, okay, like, one, as a trainer, I didn't say this to him, but, I knew how it worked. You don't outrank me, you're teaching me. We're colleagues, okay? The guy I'm speaking to, he's not the head of retail, but he's the head trainer. He's basically your boss, right? He's basically your boss, who I'm speaking to. Who can fire me, who can literally sack me at any point, right? So he's saying something to me. This higher boss is saying something to me, and I'm taking it in. You come across and you give me this t-shirt, and I thank you profusely in front of him, right? And I say, but please excuse me, I'm just having this conversation. I'll be right with you in a second, and we'll have a chat, and I'll buy you a pint for this. Awesome. Thank you so much for doing it for me. You then shout at me in front of him. I'm not sure whether it was to make yourself look good or whatever, but, and from that moment on, our relationship was done, right? He's approached the whole problem with completely the wrong attitude. He approached it with an arrogant, swinish swagger and revealed who he actually was to me, right? I thought this guy was a cool guy, that he was on my side, but from that moment on, I was like, okay, can't trust you. Basically. Then this is the guy who's supposed to be in my corner. He's my trainer, my representative. And from that moment on, I was like, yeah, I can't trust him. Can't trust you. So that's it, right? So when John says things like this, it really triggers me. Because I'm like, that attitude John just showed there of, I think you'll find you're not, right? That's the kind of attitude I'm talking about. It came out minutely there, because John's obviously years and decades on from this now. It sort of broke through to the surface there, that Games Workshop sneer, right? I've been on the receiving end, unjustifiably, and it doesn't feel nice. So, yeah, sorry for going down memory lane there, but yeah, it did trigger me a little bit. Yeah. And this is common. This attitude is common, especially amongst the middle management of Games Workshop. It is extremely common. And from that moment on, basically, my card was marked. I'm not in Nottingham. I'm working in my store, right? This guy is working in Nottingham. The very next training session I go on, people are giving me side-eye, right? People are giving me side-eye. People are acting like I'm some sort of an issue. People are acting like I'm a fly in the ointment. And that was it. Basically, that was it. One bad interaction that was basically a misunderstanding on his part led to basically the first domino falling that was going to get me out of the company. You know, and yeah, John's attitude there really did. It's sort of like when you twerk your funny bone. Like, oh, ow! That's yeah. Okay, so let's go back a little bit.
He just wouldn't get out of the armchair. I said, no, you can't sit in a chair all day. He said, well, I think you'll find I'm going to. I had to say, well, I think you'll find you're not going to.
Yeah.
So that was a free and frank discussion.
Yeah, sure.
So we had to change the look and the feel of the shops. Now, one of the things that we did was we had a very important meeting with all our managers, and I got them all to a pub in Nottinghamshire, and the Shipley Boat pub it was. I got them all together and I said, look guys, we're going to do something really radical, and we're going to turn these stores, these Games Workshop shops, into proper Games Workshop shops. And the premise is that we just sell Games Workshop products. And they said, oh yeah, okay. I said, no, I mean literally just Games Workshop. No Dungeons and Dragons, no Bunnies and Burrows, no RuneQuest, nothing, certainly no Ouija board sets or like that. It's just going to be Citadel Miniatures and Games Workshop. So do you think you could do that? And to a man, they all stepped up and said, yeah. I said, well, okay, this is a huge ask. Yeah, we're doing it. So spearheaded by our Newcastle store manager, Ian, who's a great little Geordie lad, he basically put up more and more wall racks and had a good 8-metre long wall of Citadel miniatures. And so he quadrupled the amount of Citadel we were carrying. And just over 3 weekends, he showed us how much more he could sell. And it was like a feeding frenzy. People were driving for miles to come to the store because people were not, we never put out the whole range, which sounds mad now, but there were so many models, we couldn't fit them into the store because there are things like kites and chess sets there, so we couldn't fit them all in there. They were in little drawers, so people couldn't see them. So Ian Hensel, his name was, he kind of led the charge, and then we started developing what became the Games Workshop retail chain and the feel of it. Now, the one thing, well, there are many great things about Brian Amps.
God, that brings up memories, that picture, right? I'm sure you all remember this on the high street back in the day. The red and yellow, right? Oh, man. So the Liverpool store, it wasn't always here, it was somewhere else before this, but when I first started going to Games Workshop, it was on Lord Street, which is one of the main streets in Liverpool. It's on the main thoroughfare there, on the way to James Street Station. And it was run by the lovely guy and a few other staff members. One called Wayne. I think he still works in Liverpool somewhere, not for Games Workshop, for another company. And a guy called Paul, who was American, a tall guy with a moustache. And they were basically, I would describe them as surrogate big brothers, right? These are guys who took me under their wing and taught me how to play and convinced me to do Eldar, because in 3rd edition Eldar were a bit of a glass cannon and nobody wanted to touch them. I really liked them, so they taught me. They said, no, if you like Eldar, we'll teach you how to use them. You know, they're very difficult, but if you can use them, like a knife through butter with these Space Marines, right? I got battered for months until I learned. It's kind of like Dark Souls, right? You lose till you learn, and I learned. And eventually, I was a really good player with Eldar, and I took Wayne to such a, I think it was Wayne anyway. I took him to such a degree because he was the best Chaos player in the store that I nearly beat him. Nobody ever beats him. He's like Sub-Zero, right? Nobody ever beats Sub-Zero. Nobody ever beats him. And I very nearly beat him to the point where he said, "You need to go to tournaments." I never did because I was a kid. You know what I mean? I was very nervous. But he said, "Mate, your army's good enough. You're a good enough player with Eldar. You need to go to tournaments." And for a Games Workshop guy to say that to me was like, they basically made sure that, okay, you've now got a customer for life. And that's basically how I wanted to run a Games Workshop store. I wanted to do the same thing. I wanted to be that guy. You know what I mean? And I'd like to think that there are people out there from that store, from that time, that are still in the hobby now, who were brought in by me. One cool thing about the channel is I can now do that without ever leaving my desk, which is really cool. Anyway, moving on.
But if he asked you to do something, he would give you his full support.
Sure.
So he'd make sure that White Dwarf would bang the drums about the stores and really talk and do a store profile. He'd make sure that the shop fits would happen on time. and he backed you all the way, which was really good, a very useful boss to have.
He had that vision and
Yeah.
trusted people to see it through, kind of thing.
Yes, it's often Brian's vision. So much of Games Workshop was at the time.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it was a one-man band, but
Yeah.
but Brian was certainly the mover and shaker. So the first thing we did was to get some gaming tables in. Now, nowadays it's fairly obvious if you've got a gaming shop that you'd have gaming tables in them.
Aha! I got you. I got you. Okay, it doesn't work Games Workshop anymore, of course, but I think you can see the changing attitudes here. What did John say there? Let's just go back and listen to what John just said.
Shaker. So the first thing we did was to get some gaming tables in. Now, nowadays it's fairly obvious if you've got a gaming shop that you'd have gaming tables in them.
I mean, yeah. Well, the first things we did was get gaming tables in. We changed Games Workshop. Why? Because you want to play games in your Games Workshop store. It's a gaming store. It sells games. It sells tabletop war games. Of course you want to play games in the store, right? We're seeing the disconnect between old Games Workshop and new, aren't we? Because obviously John doesn't work for Games Workshop anymore. He works for Warlord Games, one of the key founders over there. And I find it I would love to have a conversation with people, old guard, quote unquote. Not that they'd want to speak to me after I've just called them the old guard, but you know what I'm saying. Who used to be at Games Workshop and what their feelings are on not having games in Games Workshop stores anymore. That is a relatively new, past 10 years phenomenon in the UK, where you literally are not allowed to play games in Games Workshop stores. They don't want that in stores anymore. They've gone way away from being a hub for the community, and they're now just saying, no. We don't do games in Games Workshop stores because those are the kinds of people who generally choke up stores and mean that we don't sell anything anymore. The issue therein, I think the change came about because old-style Games Workshop, like the ones John is describing here, they were community stores, and this was a time when the company was actually listening to the fan base, and it was selling all sorts of things, and they wanted to build a community hub. It was a much more innocent time. So games in stores didn't generate less sales, they generated more sales, because that's the kind of company they were trying to run. With how Games Workshop have treated their customers since, games in the stores now naturally breeds toxicity, because you're going to get people who spend so much money on their models that they're absolutely obsessed with winning at all costs, with certain armies not being worth playing, that kind of a thing. And, times have changed to the point where Games Workshop have said, yeah, we don't want games in the stores anymore, because it leads to less sales. You're wasting your time. It leads to less sales. We're trimming the fat. I would argue from this interview that people like John, for instance, would argue that, well, that's not the case. That's not the case. I think if you do it right, games can lead to more sales, not less. I have no idea. That is my a sort of educated guess of why Games Workshop don't do games in stores anymore. It's trimming of the fat. It's literally them saying, does this lead to us? Is this more headache than it's worth? Are we taking on more responsibility and making not as much money? And I think they've come to the conclusion that yes, games in stores means we've got to have more staff in stores. We've got to have a manager whose attention is diverted from what is important, which is selling models and good customer interactions. So it's not worth having in stores. I would argue you're making so much money, hire more staff. Simple. Hire more staff. Have games in stores. Make your stores the hub of the community. And by the way, have it be a privilege, not a right. Give the managers the absolute power to say, no. You need to book your time in our tables, our amazing tables, and you have that Warhammer World feeling. You're going to a Games Workshop store should be an event. We're going to go play at the Games Workshop store with all of the marvelous things that entails. Awesome scenery, awesome boards. You respect your time there. Even charge for it. If Games Workshop charged for space, like other stores do, Dude, they'd make so much money. If you said to Games Workshop managers, right, we're sending people out, we're gonna give you 2 or 3 gaming tables with absolutely fire scenery on it, and we'll do a rotation. Like every year we change them out for something else. Whatever we're pushing that year is on the tables, right? And people have to pay to come in to play on the tables. Right? They get a cup of tea and they come in, play on the tables. Really cool. It's a really cool atmosphere. And by the way, I don't get why people are so against Games Workshop charging you to play in their spaces. Every other store does it. It's standard. So charge money. It's fine. Charge whatever it is, a £5 a session between you, £2.50. That's less than a pint of beer, mate. That's 2 Mars bars for what, 4 or 5 hours of entertainment? Come on, son. Come on. How much do you spend to go to the cinema? 15, 20 quid? To sit there and watch a movie? Nah. There are ways around this, and I think losing guys like John and other people from Games Workshop is a real blow, because these are the kinds of guys who would see that and go, you know what, there's a whole thing here we're not tapping into. Why would we ban gaming from stores? It's in our fucking name. It's right there. There's Games Workshop on top of it. That's why they're changing it all to Warhammer stores. Why? Because now they don't have to justify it. Warhammer is now basically an iStore for iPhones, right? Where they exist to sell you the product. You don't use the product in the store. They exist to sell you the product. That's it. Games Workshop, on the other hand, the name Games Workshop comes with certain responsibilities. The first one is games. It's right there. You play games in your store. That's why they're changing it. Anyway, I had to spend a while on that just to highlight the difference in mentality between that generation and now. You know, no games in the stores now. And I really do wonder what guys like John would think of no games in the stores. Maybe they would try and back Games Workshop up. I doubt they would, because that's not how Warlord Games works. That's just not how they work. You can play games on their properties. They would encourage you to play games. Why? Because that's what they do. Moving on.
But it wasn't then. Nobody did. And so I sort of thought, I spoke to Brian. He said, hey, I think we should have a gaming table in there. So we bought a number of table tennis tables because it was cheap. And my mate Chris, his mum, made some black cloth to go over them to reach down to disguise the fact they were table tennis tables, really. And we put these table tennis tables into those stores and started running games of Warhammer. This is pre-40k.
Yeah, sure.
And what it did, of course, it provided excitement in the store, reasons for people to go there, and it showcased gaming at its best. When people used to...
Exactly, John. No, exactly. I've said this on my channel for years now. That's exactly what it is. You're showcasing the best of the hobby. And that should be, by the way, that should be the standard. You say to people, if you want to play in Games Workshop, if you want to play in our stores, then we're expecting you to showcase the best of our hobby. Okay? We don't want any lard arse off the street who smells. There are standards to our stores. You need to get a shower, you need to smell nice, you need to have a fully painted army, and if you've got that, you can play in our stores. No problem. Absolutely no problem. If you don't have that, then we will make sure you can have that. We will teach you how to paint your models. We will give you spaces to paint your models in the store. All right? We will have, guys on store who can handle people with autism, so we can tell you how to get your hygiene done properly. We can give you a leaflet on how to self-groom and make sure you look nice when you come into the store. We will hold you to standards. But we're not just going to sit here and take the piss out of you. We will make sure that you are meeting the standards of playing a game at Games Workshop, because you're one of us now. If you come and play in our store, you're part of the team. You don't work for the company, but you're part of our hobby, and we're proud of you. We're proud of you. We're proud to have you in our store. That's the kind of attitude John's talking about here. I'm going whole hog further afield. Because I'm like, no, you can't smell. Like, no, I'm sorry, no, you can't come in. You have to have a shower. Sorry. I've got this wrong with me. I've got autism. Okay, cool. So do most of the people who work here, but they don't stink of shit. So go and get a shower. Seriously. Like, I don't know, man. I don't get it. You hold people to that standard, and if they can't meet that standard right now, then you give them a clear path through where they can meet that standard. Beyond any of the hygiene stuff, which is a funny topic for people I know. But if you've worked in any of these companies, you will know what I mean. There's little to no excuse to not get a shower, or at least whack some deodorant on, and all that sort of stuff. On the flip side of that, fully painted armies. Well, that's a bit elitist, isn't it? No. We're asking you to engage in the hobby, to be a part of the hobby in the store. Now, if you want to go play games elsewhere with grey models, absolutely. It's a completely valid way to play the game. We're not saying it isn't. But we're selling the product in this store, so you need to be an advertisement for the product when you come in. You hold that responsibility. You can play with our amazing scenery on our amazing boards, with amazing staff around you who can help you with all of your rules queries at the drop of a hat that we pay for. All right? But we ask you to meet certain standards. Your army must be painted. Your hygiene must be good. You must be on good behaviour. Don't be a dick. If you take this to people and you say these are the standards at Games Workshop, but you can play here, no problem. Dude, the stores will be fucking packed. Packed. Absolutely rammed. And again, it's really frustrating hearing people like John, extolling that and saying, yeah, absolutely, this is what we should be doing. This is, why wouldn't you have games in your stores? We should be the guys around which, we're the fulcrum around which the local hobby spins. That's how it should be. Right now, Warhammer stores are an afterthought. You walk past them, there's nobody in there but a miserable manager just drumming his fingers on the till. There's no events. There's no community. It's literally, come in, let me give you your introduction game, or go away if you don't want to buy anything, right? I fully understand why Games Workshop don't run games in the stores. But at the same time, that doesn't mean there isn't a solution. There is. There is a solution where you can have games in the stores and it not turn into a toxic fucking mess. That's just my opinion.
To walk in and they'd see there would be a figure cabinet with some the occasional dragon here and there and things like that, but it didn't show the armies being played, the excitement that was Warhammer.
Yeah.
So, but getting a bunch of guys in and rolling dice and whooping and cheering and shouting and abusing each other, suddenly it became an activity centre.
Absolutely.
And it really transformed the stores.
Absolutely.
And then, of course...
He's completely right. Completely right. Notice he said abuse as well. It's fine. It's fine. You're all adults. Have fun. Have fun.
If you're going to have a gaming table there, the next stage was to get a painting table. So we installed a painting table so people could come in on their lunch hours or after school or after college or after work and while away an hour or two just figure painting, and we'd let them use the store's paints and things. Yeah. And that's how all the tutorage came. That's how we were able to form this, at the time, extraordinary bond between our customers and our staff.
It was like a sense of community.
Oh, it's exactly. We built that sense of community, yeah. And people wanted to hang out in the Games Workshop store, and they wanted to be part of Games Workshop, and we wanted them to do it too. So,
dude, it was cool. That's the whole point. It was cool. Can you imagine that? Games Workshop was cool in the 90s and early 2000s, man. It was cool to hang out on Games Workshop. You'd go with your mates and just chill out because these staff members were your heroes. They were your heroes. They're like, oh my God, like how cool are these guys, right? And what John's saying is right. Like you establish a community feel. You get people in and you establish a community feel. You have fun. You know, you get that bond, as you just said, between the staff and the customers. It's great, man. It's great. Now, when I was there, they paid lip service to this because I brought this up in my interview. Okay, I said I want my store to be the central mecca of the hobby in the local area, right? I want it to be. You don't go to one of these other stores that is a trade account store. You come to ours first. You come to Games Workshop. Why? Because North will be there, and you like North. you like North, and we're all having fun. You know, that's the kind of thing that we're into, right? For instance, I had a league in my store, a 500-point 40k league, which I was not involved in, right? But we had two guys, and this kind of insulted me actually, because you had two guys who have the same name as me, okay? And they had a different second initial, which is great, because that means that I could whack their names on the leaderboard. Nobody thought I was playing, right? It was one of those things. And when I went in for basically a talk at head office, basically just see how things are going, they grilled me over, why are you playing games in the stores? I was like, well, why are you playing games in your store? And I said, well, it's fun. Well, what about selling models? Well, I am selling models. I'm in the green. You can see him in the green. You can see him making money every week. It's just fun. But but why are you playing in the tournaments? I'm not. Well, there's your name at the top of the leaderboard. Dude, that's not me. And by the way, why don't you know what my second initial is? Like, why don't you know what my name is? You know, I'm just a number to you. You don't even know what my name is. That's not my name. Okay? You know, here's the guy. I showed him a picture on my Facebook. That's him there. That's him. You know? Those are his initials. That's his name. There he is playing in my store, having a good time. That's the attitude of what Games Workshop was. That's what it turned into. Against gaming, against community, against all of that. Now it's a fucking iStore. That's all it is. It's an Apple store. It's a mobile phone shop.
We only then hired people who could play Warhammer or could paint properly. And we could show these young lads, I mean, commonly 14-year-old boys would come in and we'd show them how to paint a model, and they'd say, I could never paint that. And patiently, the manager would take them through it, say, well, look, here's what I painted mostly. Why don't you just paint the sword and we'll base it? And the kid would do that. And then he'd feel so proud. Take that home to his mum and dad, because we'd give him the model to take away, because it wouldn't cost us much. And he'd be in next week buying models, because his confidence level had built up. So the stores, the most important thing about the stores, and still is at Wonderful Games Workshop, is the store manager and all the staff. They have to be a blend of clearly a businessman, a shopkeeper, but they're also a policeman, a tutor, a teacher, and to be the older brother that you wish you had, not the one you've got.
Yeah, there you go, right? Exactly what I just said, right? The older brother you wish you had, but you haven't got. And it's remarkable how he said, you're a teacher and a tutor. That's literally what I went into after Games Workshop. That's literally the job I went into. Because a lot of my... I'd had my degree and master's degree and stuff, but also Games Workshop instilled a lot of those lessons in me, right? And how to teach people, how to have really advanced social empathy, so you can get the most out of somebody. You know, you can how to sidestep anger, or how to sidestep somebody who basically doesn't want to know. You know, oh, I'm just here to browse. I'm just here to get my white dwarf. Leave me alone, right? Well, you were trained to get around that, not to bother them. Okay, most of the hobby nightmares we see are of Games Workshop staff not doing their fucking jobs properly, right? You're not trained to dry hump the customer out of a store. All right, that is a staff member who is obsessed with doing better so the higher ups like him or her. Okay, you're not trained to do that at Games Workshop. You are not. I can tell you now, you're not trained to bother the customer. Okay, You're trained to have good customer interactions. That's it. That's literally it. You're trained to get the most out of every interaction you have with a customer because they take it very, very seriously. As John just said there, the staff, manager at Games Workshop has to be a policeman. That's true. And a lot of people don't like to think about it that way, but it's true. You have to adjudicate conflict all the time. Happens all the time. Dude, you're in a store where people are playing war games. There's going to be arguments sometimes. You have to adjudicate it. Calm it down. Make sure everyone's smiling, having a good time. You know? Adjudicate that stuff. You got to be a tutor and a teacher. Yeah, you got to bring people in. Not just kids. You got to bring people in. Teach them how to do introduction games. Teach them how to paint their first swords. How to paint their first models. Do that kind of a thing. It just... You work so hard at Games Workshop and in retail. You work so hard. And, I'd love to have a conversation with somebody like John Stallard or somebody like that, just to see what they thought of what I went through, because they must have heard other things, or they must have been around other things that have happened in retail where they've gone, ugh, because middle management can screw things up, and they do. They lose good people all the time. I'm not saying I was necessarily a good person. I've grown up a lot since then, and there are a few things that I was told. A few people said things to me at Games Workshop, and I took a running jump. I was like, "How fucking dare you!" And I took a running jump at them, not physically, but verbally. So no, you don't speak to me like that, right? When I could have handled it a lot better. But like, so I was no day at the beach. The way I would be really interested to know that if they went and watched my videos from way back in the day when it was much more raw. I've forgotten a lot of stuff from when I worked at Games Workshop, right? It was like nearly 10 years ago now. So, but I would like them to look at my old videos that were very raw, that I recorded literally months later. It was very, very new in my head. It was all there. And what they think of that, of what happened to me. I think we could have a fully frank and enlightened conversation. Let's put it that way. Moving on. Because they do work hard, insanely hard. And I think middle management get in the fucking way all the time. They really do. They really, really, really do. Games Workshop having a flat corporate structure would be amazing. I want it like CEO, line manager, me. That's it. That's what it should be. CEO, line manager for my area, who's basically the head of retail, right? It should be CEO, head of retail, and then me. That's what you should be trying to keep it as. Yes, it means more work for the head of retail. Yes, the head of retail may need an assistant or two, but suck it. Do that. Pay your head of retail more then. All of these middle managers and trainers in the middle just muddy the waters and upset people and get in the way. And bully people at the company that they don't like. That's it. That's all they do. You get some good ones. You do get some good trainers. I met one or two that were amazing for me when I was there. Right? But for every one that was good, there were two who were snarky. Two who they had the Games Workshop arrogance about them. Right? It's very easy to get kicked out of heaven, my friend. What the fuck are you talking about? You're paying me minimum wage, dude, to do a management position. Shut up. Let's move on.
Because they would ever so patiently, 5 days a week, go through painting Space Marines, how you have to paint them. That's really cool, they'd say, but you need to base it. Kids know when they're being patronised, because that happens at school all the time. Oh, well done, Johnny, that looks great.
Dude, he knows what he's talking about. This is absolutely, yeah, they do.
Well, our store managers would say, that looks good, but it'd be better if you put these transfers on. Now, doesn't that look better? And the kid.
Why was I never... Okay, so I was taught this after Games Workshop, okay? Not one person at Games Workshop ever taught me stuff like this. This is prime how to teach 101. without patronising, without turning the other person off. John knows how to do it. The old Games Workshop guys knew how to do it. Why was I never told this? Why was I never taught this? When I went to do my Masters in Education, that's when I learned shit like this. But here you are at Games Workshop getting it for free. Why did you let these people go? Why did you not just pay Johnson more money and keep him around? Maybe he didn't want to stay around. I don't know. Maybe we'll find out.
Oh, yeah, it does. It looks great now, and I've done that. So that sense of achievement they were getting was wonderful. And that led to a big bond, of course, also between the parents and our staff. Because the parents would know that you're looking after their, generally a son or daughter. It's trustworthy, a good place to go. Yeah, there are a few long-haired people there, but the Games Workshop staff, they were unfailingly polite and nice. And if they didn't, we'd be brutal with them and get rid of them, discard them. And we got this lovely bunch of guys.
See the arrogance coming out again? See it? Do you see that? Right. Now, how many of these situations do you think where a Games Workshop staffer... Sorry, John, I've paused your face in not a very flattering moment there. How many Games Workshop staffers do you think, in John's time, were confronted with some really bad behaviour from a customer and said, mate, you can't do that, and they basically, read them the riot act, and then, because they were rude to a customer, they got sacked? I would argue there's probably maybe quite a few from what he just said there, right? Don't get me wrong, if you're generally an unpleasant person at Games Workshop, yeah, you're not going to last very long. But that's in any retail management position. So he's right there. Yeah, those people need to go. But I the way he was so flippant about that, I've been very kind to John, I think, throughout this, but there have been certain moments where that old Games Workshop, get rid of them, discard them, that kind of a thing. That attitude, it shines through the cracks every now and again. It never leaves. It's always in there. It's ready to jump out. Have you ever noticed whenever you speak to somebody who was in the Kool-Aid of Games Workshop, that they will always have this swagger about them whenever they talk about their time there, or they will talk as if they are the coolest person in the room when they're not. Do you know what I mean? It's very strange. Have any of you ever come across that? There'll be an ex-Games Workshop manager or an ex-Games Workshop staffer, or whatever, and they'll be working in maybe even another hobby store years later, or another whatever, and he will generally act like he knows everything. Literally, I know everything. I used to work for Games Workshop. That kind of a thing. That kind of a chutzpah arrogance, earned sometimes, has to be said. Some of these guys know their shit. I'm sure John does, right? But at the same time, it comes out. Discard them. Get rid of them. Discard them, right? I don't know. I agree with what he's saying. If you're not polite to customers, and especially to parents who are paying for their models, who are... Those are your real customers, aside from the kids. I agree. You need to be generally polite and nice and good, honest. But, every now and again, what John's talking about here, remember when people say Games Workshop's like a creche where you can just leave your kids all day? It's not. It's not. Please don't listen to what he's saying there. Do not leave your children at Games Workshop all day in school holidays. Be a parent and pay for some people to look after your kids. It's not their job. It's not Games Workshop's job to look after your children during school holidays. Now, if you want your children to come round with their grandparents for an hour or two, or maybe 3 or 4 or 5 hours, that's fine. Unsupervised children being in the Games Workshop from open till close, no. I draw the line, and I did. I had to have a word with a few parents back in the day. Like, look, I love the kid, awesome, brilliant, but not really appropriate for me to be around them all day, especially during there was one kid who was in my store because he was sick for 2 weeks off school, so it was just me and him in the store every day. I had to kick him out for lunch. I had to take him to lunch once. He was like, I've got no lunch money, right? I had to have a word with the mum. Like, listen, it's not appropriate. She shouldn't be in a store with a stranger, an adult, all day on his own. Well, you're not a stranger. You're Games Workshop. No. No, I'm sorry. No, that's not. I'm fully happy to support you for a couple of hours a day, to have him here, to teach him how to paint, to do all this kind of stuff. But I've got all the work to do, and he's unsafe. If I've got to run into the back to get something, he's on his own. He's unsupervised, right? It's not great. Thankfully, she got it, and she was, I don't know. I thought I was going to get bollocked for that, but I didn't. But again, that's the kind of attitude where maybe John would sack me for that. You don't know. He might have been like, that's inappropriate, absolutely discarded. I'm going to discard you, right? Sorry, but, there are some times where a customer has to be told that this isn't appropriate. So I do wonder how many scenarios he's talking about there. We just discarded them, where it was actually the manager had a point or the staff had a point. You know what I mean? Like, you don't know, but neither do I. Maybe he was justified in every single one he took. I don't know. But just bringing up the fact that, in conclusion, the old Games Workshop Hutzpah does come up every now and again. You can see it filtering through the cracks here.
Guys who just enjoyed sharing their hobby with everybody else, and that built this fantastic community in the stores. This great loyalty, which you'd seen every year when we would have Games Day at Birmingham, at the arena in Birmingham, and I don't know, 20,000 people would suddenly disgorge from all these coaches, all carrying banners. The Newcastle coach, 50 Geordies coming down, and Liverpool coach, and the Swansea coach, and all arriving, often dressed up, but always carrying banners, to have this wonderful day out. And that was how powerful the retail chain was. And you'll notice that over the years, over 50 years now, Games Workshop has never advertised. They've never had a paid advert that I know of, because White Dwarf magazine was a lot of their marketing spend in WH Smith's, in the newsagents. But the second thing it was the stores. By growing the store chain to, well, in the end about 140, whatever it is in England, when I was there, they were the advertising, because in every county, town or city, at some stage, a mum or dad or a kid are going to walk past a Games Workshop and say, what's this then? And those big open windows we would always have, and we'd pay for the lights to be on in the cabinet all night, so when people come back from the pub, they could look in. That was all deliberately done, so you see them standing around at 11:30 at night, looking at the dragons on the Friar Lane one in Nottingham. Oh, that looks great. Yeah.
You can't do that anymore, unfortunately. I had my window smashed at my store. So one time I forgot to turn off the cabinet lights at my store. I came back the next morning, on the Saturday morning, busiest day of the week, window smashed. So, unfortunately, John is describing a world that is gone now. And even looking at the coaches, any of you guys remember those coaches? I do. We used to go from Games Workshop. Would you get that now? The Games Workshop lay on coaches from their trademark Warhammer store trademark stores. Do they lay on coaches from those stores to Warhammer Fest? Of course they fucking don't, right? Because you're a consumer. You're not a customer or a fan. You're a consumer. You're lucky to be there. 600 quid, please. Right? That's where we are now. The world John is describing isn't there anymore, unfortunately. It really is, unfortunately, too. Because I for all of the, this hasn't been a Glaze piece, which I'm quite happy about so far. Like, I thought I was literally going to come into this video and go, wow, what a guy this guy is. No. There's been a few things I disagree with him on. A few little worrying signs I picked up on. But, like, the world he's describing is generally a better place. It was. It really was. And that is not rose-tinted glasses. It wasn't a perfect world. We had different things, different issues. But you could leave your cabinet lights on overnight in a Games Workshop store with rather expensive models behind them, and nothing happens to them. Do you know what I mean? Of course, you lock your store. You can't just get in. But no one's going to smash your windows in an attempt to either piss you off or get at the models inside,
And it's all about building that excitement. And so that was my role as head of retail. I had my lieutenant was a chap called Tony Cottrell, who's still at Games Workshop running. Well, he's run Forge World and everything, and he was quite magnificent in doing all that. We had one logistics man called John, we thought was an elderly man then. Of course he wasn't, but he seemed a lot older than we were, and he was very good at doing the detail side. And then we had a chap who's passed away, unfortunately, a chap called Tim Wilson, who used to go and open the stores for us and sleep in them if necessary to get them open in time. Opening the stores, none of us had ever really done it before. We just made it all up. And Brian left us to it. And I said to Tony, well, Tony, where do we open all these stores? And we thought, well, let's look at the football clubs we know. And it really was. We said, well, Man United, I've heard of them. Yeah, they'll be good. Ipswich, yeah, they're not so good. Perhaps we'll do that later. And we just went fill the gaps that there were by looking at the League Division 1 in those days. So we could pick another 12 towns, and then we'd look at League Division 2 and go all the way down. That's how we did it. And then we got a little more sophisticated, because we suddenly realised, well, if there's a Marks and Spencer's in town, that's probably a good place to go.
Sure.
Very middle class, and and
a bit of money to the town.
And then when we got really sophisticated, we looked for where there was an early learning centre. I don't think they're in business anymore, but that was for posh families, for so-called clever kids, and they were exactly the same size as a Games Workshop store, 700 square foot. And if a town had an early learning centre, that meant they'd had proper property people looking at the sites where it should be, where you should park, where you could go, and where the rents are affordable, etc., etc. So in the end, we just followed wherever they went, and it did all our work for us. So.
Wow.
Genius. Again, it doesn't take much, does it? It doesn't take much. Just, yeah. Very, very, very clever. Very clever.
Yeah.
Really quite simple. Why reinvent the wheel?
Sure, absolutely, yeah.
And that worked out very well for us. And then in the end, we just kept refining it, and we thought, what's the smallest town we could be in, and run a successful store. And one of the smallest was Worcester, which is my old hometown, and we opened up a store in Worcester, and the rent was £4,000. I'm thinking, but it would take £100,000 a year, and so it would make money.
Sure.
And so we were experimenting all the time with what we could do. And the shop fit was...
That's a month. £4,000 a month. Not £4,000 a year. So yeah, before anybody... So the £48,000 a year in rent, and they're making around 100 grand per store, essentially. Which is about right, about what they do now.
Always cheap as chip.
The figures have changed, but the percentage of their profit is probably above that now, to be honest with you, considering what they charge. If
you spent more than £15,000, you were being unnecessarily fancy. Sure. So and I could. We had so many shop fitters coming to us to say, "Oh, I envisage doing your stores. I can see them half a castle." I go, "Yeah, and half a spaceship." You're going to say, "Yes, that's right." So no, we're not interested in that. We just want a box, a till, a gaming table, and a painting table. That's what we want, and good staff. So we wouldn't waste money on shop fits, because again, we had people like John Blanche doing this amazing artwork for Warhammer. So we'd use artwork, or in fact just the product quite often, and that's how we'd get the stores open.
I think the shops at the time had a distinctive red look to them, didn't they?
They had red. It's Sun Dealer Panelling, it was called. I think that was the brand name, but it's lots of red around the top. Sun Dealer Panelling. It was cheap as well. That's why we did it. Yeah. Just red felt, but just filled a lot of space and added colour.
Well, this is something that I understand why they changed this. Okay, I know a lot of people are going to think that's really. John looks at me. He's looking at me like he's judging me there. Probably is. But I understand why they got rid of the red felt thing. I think moving into the 21st century, especially the 2010s, the Games Workshop I worked at as a staff member was very red, and this was in like 2016. So yeah, they hadn't changed it up until this point. And as far as I'm aware, they still haven't changed it now. It's still the same. Or maybe they've changed it since. I've not really looked. It does seem like it should be a Warhammer store by now, like a rebranded Warhammer store. That's now sleek, and everything needs to be chrome and just black or grey. That kind of a look. And it sucks. There's something to the old school, I think you could have updated the red and yellow without taking it all away and redoing it as a sterile shop center. You know, Games Workshop should look different. It shouldn't look like every other store on the high street, in my opinion. You should walk into a Games Workshop store and immediately know where you are, rather than even if you take all the models away and all the branding away, you should walk into a Games Workshop store and go, "Oh, I'm in Games Workshop." Right? If you can't do that, then I would suggest, you know, it's failed. You know, your shop front has failed. And you don't need to spend a lot of money, as John just said. There, it's red felt. Put some red felt up. It's fine. There are ways to make that sleeker without just gutting the entire thing. Anybody else miss the old red felt? Let me know.
And so that's how they all came about.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about expanding the business and kind of outside the United Kingdom?
Yeah, well, as you know, there are probably over 700 Games Workshop stores around the world now. It's quite amazing.
Yeah, there's 500 in the UK, I think, isn't there?
No, there isn't. Nowhere near the number.
Not 500.
There you go. Cheers, John.
I think so.
Oh, no, I might just thinking of 500 globally. I remember a couple of years ago they had
Many hundreds. So in the 700s, I think it is now, and a load of independent stores either. But yeah, we filled the UK quite nicely, and then Games Workshop had subsidiaries in Spain and France and Germany and Australia, and they started opening up their own ones, and they broadly did the same thing. They didn't need to reinvent the wheel. Each of the countries would have a flagship store, which they were particularly proud of. There's one in Paris, for instance, which was always running neck and neck with our Oxford Street store.
Sure.
And then one year they pipped the Oxford Street store. I remember how pleased the French were and how annoyed the Oxford Street lads were. But yeah, and there's a lot of money to be made in the stores, actually. It's quite amazing with just one product, really. Just Games Workshop, that's all they sell.
Yeah.
Well, he's right. There's a lot of money to be made, and I think in leaving gaming in stores on the floor and not doing it, and taking away that community spirit of a Games Workshop store that they've done now in the UK, I think they're leaving a lot of money on the table. It's never going to happen, but I would love to hear an explanation. We can always theorize, but I'd love to hear an explanation of why they do this, why this is a thing.
Do you have any memories of Warhammer World being developed?
Yeah, Warhammer World again was Tony Cotterell's vision. Tony, and perhaps a little bit of Robin Dews, but it's Tony who did all the hard work on it. And again, it looked like an enormous hole. I think, well, can we fill that? And it didn't take long to fill it. If you go to Warhammer World now, it's an absolute.
It's a day out.
It's a treat to go out. Yeah. It is a treat. They've got a proper castle there, better than Nottingham Castle. Massive gaming areas, massive shop, and this wonderful museum full of dioramas, which you can absolutely have a lovely day out.
Still the same diorama now. They've not changed this in so long. So this diorama was there when I worked there, right? This diorama was the same when I worked there. That was nearly 10 years ago. Not changed. It's cool, but yeah, not changed.
Out there, and I suggest you do. And then come and see Warlord Games afterwards. We're only 300 yards away.
Yeah, just over the road.
Just over the road. Come and see us if you've got any money left. But yeah, that was Tony's concept, and for years we kept asking the Nottingham City Council for the brown signage that they put for museums and things like that, and they kept saying, well, no, you're just a shop really. And we said, mate, you don't understand how many people visit this place.
Yeah. And
Robin Dews, the White Dwarf editor, he even got the Nottingham Museum, which is at the castle, to do a Games Workshop art month. And so for a month we hung all the Games Workshop artwork in the museum, and it was the biggest exhibition they've ever had.
Yeah, sure.
They had, I kid you not, 40,000 visitors came to see it.
Wow.
And
where are all these events now? Do you know what I mean? Where are all these events now? I know Games Workshop want to keep things in-house, but it's just fucking sterile. It's literally Twitch. Let's play some games on Twitch. Let's turn it into an esport. Where are all these events where they just turn up to a place like Nottingham Castle and they show you cool artwork, and they let you speak to the designers, and they let you generally walk around and immerse yourself in it, right? When they come to your school and they do a presentation about how cool Warhammer is, like, where are all these events now? At different time, but it didn't have to be. It just didn't have to go away. Not in my opinion. This is how Games Workshop should be, in my opinion.
And they were just blown away because that people had no idea how the power of Warhammer, and that was a great success. So, yeah, long live the Games Workshop retail chain.
Yeah, I mean, do you feel you achieved everything like you set out to do, like at the time?
Yes, it's the proudest thing of my life.
Yeah, sure.
Was opening up the Games Workshop retail chain. I had help and direction, but it was what we got was a great feeling of spirit in the retail chain.
Sure.
Of the managers and the shop assistants that were pulling to a common goal. And so we had the red uniform, and read all this, and we did a famous codex of how to behave in your store, which we...
Hey, I've shown that off before. The old black book, got that still. I know, I'm not going to read it out on stream. There are pictures of it on the community page. You've seen it, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to read it out on stream. Not the most professional thing to do. There's also an employee handbook as well, which I've still got. Very interesting reads. If I ever see anyone ever makes it to Castle North to say hello, you can have a little read through it and see. But yeah, it's very, very interesting to see what the ethos and the dynamic is of Games Workshop. But at the end of the day, no, like these are personal memories. And I'm not sure if I'll get done or not for showing it off, quite frankly. So I'm not going to do it. But yeah, I do have a copy of both of these, and they're very, very, very interesting. Very interesting reading. In terms of his community feel, I'm going to be honest with you. I never felt it ever. I never felt this sense of community. Quite the opposite when I was there. I was treated like an outsider. I was treated like, who is this normal guy who knows how to speak to normal people, and why is he around us? That's how I was treated. I was treated like an alien. Imagine being a normal human being landing on a planet full of aliens, and you'll or just a massive room full of severely autistic people. That's how I kind of felt. It wasn't great. I met a few nice people when I was in Games Workshop retail. Most of them were not working for the retail chain. There were people in accounts. There were people in payroll. There were people in estate, facilities. Guys like that. Lovely, brilliant. Retail, I didn't feel that sense of community at all. Most of the training sessions I went to were very brown-nosy, very cliquey, extremely cliquey. Like everybody stuck together and you weren't welcome. Right? Everybody stuck together. Nobody made an effort to actually speak to you or get to know you or even glance your way. I dreaded every single retail training, joint training thing, because I knew the store I was in was quite far away from everybody else in terms of where it was. And it wasn't a very large store, so I was generally left to my own devices, and I'd walk into a room and there was conversations going on, and that was it. You'd stand there on your own and just, have a few drinks and then go back to your room, basically, right? It was the old guard who knew each other. They would all barrel in. The Scottish people would speak to the Scottish people, and you were left on your own, right? So I never got the sense of community at all. I think I was adopted by the Scottish people like twice. And that's because I could drink whiskey better than them. So, it was one of them. But in terms of the actual training itself, a lot of brown nosing, a lot of, throwing other people under the bus, cliquiness, There were a lot of Smithers and Mr. Burns's. Do you know what I mean? There's a lot of that going on. So I think the thing John is describing is what he left, not what I experienced. Right? That's basically my opinion, and that's what I lived. So
we all contributed to, about how to behave with customers and with integrity and all this good stuff. And they were very happy days, and I still count a lot of those store managers as friends. And occasionally the accountants at Games Workshop would say, John, we're really worried about our accounting procedures. And I say, well, how do you mean? I said, well, stock might be going missing. I said, yeah, it might. And they'd say, well, what are your procedures? I said, well, getting good and honest staff are my procedures to stop that.
Yeah, sure.
And I said, they also get a 50% discount rate, so they don't need to steal. And they're very honest and great people, hard-working people there.
Yeah.
Doing the same thing every day is hard work.
Just going back to what you were saying about the community, that's something I can attest to myself as a 8-9-year-old kid. I remember going into
rewind that for a bit.
My procedures to stop that.
Yeah, sure.
And I said they also get a 50% discount rate, so they don't need to steal.
Okay, different time, John. Different time. Don't condone stealing. I don't condone it or encourage it. The 50% discount, John, was worth a lot more before the cost of living crisis. No Games Workshop manager that I know, most of them, can afford to do the hobby. Or staffer can afford to do the hobby. Even at a 50% discount. Why? Because I'm sick of people on YouTube saying that Games Workshop people get paid well. No, they don't. You don't know that. You've never worked there. They don't. Stop fucking saying that. There's more than one YouTuber that I've caught saying that. Stop saying that. You've never worked there. Shut your fucking face. They get paid peanuts. Peanuts. Just above minimum wage for the most part. They can't afford to do the hobby they represent. Now, does that mean they should steal stuff? No. No. But John's reasoning here of, well, you get a 50% discount, so you don't need to steal. No, that's wrong. That's wrong. Okay? That's just wrong. Even at a 50% markdown, you cannot afford to do your own hobby. You can't. The solution there is not to give them a 75% discount. No. Give them more money. Raise their wages. Hire more staff. You're making upwards of 50... Not you, John. You don't work there anymore. Your company's making upwards of 50-odd million pounds a year. Clear profit. Clear. Done. In the bank. Take 10 million of that. Give it back to your staff. Hire more staff. Raise the wages. That's how you solve that problem. That's how you raise morale. That's how you keep people around. That's how you get good staff. Nowadays. The world John is describing doesn't exist. Back then, you could go and get a metalhead who was a nice guy, come in, and he'd work for you for peanuts, and he'd run a store for you. Great, no problem, right? Because he can afford to get his own place. He can afford to get, you could probably afford a flat on one manager's wage in London back then, right? You know what I'm saying? Maybe not London, but you know what I mean? Like around there, though, you'd be all right. Nowadays, no, right? Nowadays, I lived in the Midlands, when I was working at Games Workshop. I lived in basically a bed sit, essentially. Like it was a one house filled with people, each room rented out. Couldn't afford my own place. Right, I moved in with one guy, really lovely guy. I'm not going to say his name. Lovely guy though, and I had to default on my rent 2 months. Right, when I was working in Games Workshop, as a manager, I had to default on my rent 2 months. Right, things came up with my daughter that needed paying for, and I literally had to go to my friend who was my landlord and say, "Listen, mate, this has come up with my daughter. Here's how much I'm getting paid a month. Feel free to kick me out. I'll quit my job. I'll go home. But here's what's going on." And he was like, "No problem. Pay me when you can." And I did. In the end, I had to do it in installments, but I did. And But that was the situation I was in, and it wasn't a lot of money. Literally, what I needed to get for my daughter was like 200 quid. Do you know what I mean? Literally 200 quid. I need to get a, some medication and some clothes, right? But it needed doing. And that 200 quid expense pushed me over the edge. And I was a manager at Games Workshop. Wasn't working in London. I was a manager at Games Workshop. I never got myself anything. I got myself... I was living on fucking pot noodles. Okay? I wasn't living in an affluent area. I was sharing rent with somebody. And a £200, unexpected £200 expense meant I couldn't pay my rent. I was also working 10 to 12 hour days every single day running a retail business for Games Workshop. Now, if you think that sounds fair and I'm getting paid fairly, you need to give your fucking head a wobble. Okay? So this 50% lark can piss right off. Like, no, sorry, John, you're wrong. Nowadays, at least, you're wrong, because that's not the reality. Not your managers, John. Sorry, your managers at Games Workshop. Most of them, unless they're working for Tottenham Court Road or one of the big stores, they cannot afford to do this hobby. Even at a 50% markdown, they can't afford it because you pay them fucking peanuts. So I just had to say that. Just seems a bit flippant. Flippant is the word I want to use. But again, John's approaching it from his perspective, his generation. It was a different world back then. As he's just shown, it was a different world. As he was Games Day 94, all this stuff. It was a different world back then. Not the same as it is now. Do you know what I mean? Anyway, let's go back to it.
As friends, and occasionally the accountants at Games Workshop would say, John, we're really worried about our accounting procedures. And I say, well, how do you mean? I said, well, stock might be going missing. I said, yeah, it might. And they'd say, well, what are your procedures? I said, well, getting good and honest staff are my procedures to stop that.
Yeah, sure.
And I said, they also get a 50% discount rate, so they don't need to steal. And they're very honest and great people, hard-working people there. Yeah. Doing the same thing every day is hard work.
If staff members are stealing to sell stuff on, number one, it's an immediate dismissal, which should show you how often it happens, right? The only thing in your contract you can really get immediately dismissed for is buying stuff on your discount or just taking stuff out of your store and selling it to other people, But I think it's that big of a problem because they're paid so little. A lot of managers, a lot of staff members will be driven to going, well, I'm going to buy this. The more honest ones will say, I'm going to buy this on my staff discount and then sell it for 25% off. Right? So I'm going to buy it for 50% off and I'll resell it for 25% off. So I'll make that little bit of profit. And that will make sure I can pay my rent. There will be managers doing that. Absolutely, there will be managers doing that and staff members doing that. Okay. Now the more dishonest ones will just steal it, they'll just nick it. They'll known loss it, take it home, sell it, right? For 100% profit. Those guys don't last very long because they get found out very quickly. But I don't think many of these thieves are stealing because they want bigger armies. I have to say that. I know how much they get paid. They're probably stealing to resell it to make rent. Or just to get a bit more money in the bank account because they're getting paid so little. Does it excuse it? No. Absolutely not. Don't steal things, right? And if you've signed a contract, stick to it. Be honest. Just leave. Just leave. Absolutely, just leave Games Workshop. If they're not paying you enough money, leave. Do something else. Okay? Go back to university, move back in with your mum and dad, reevaluate your life. But don't sit there and, as I say all the time, don't sit in the fire and complain it's hot. I don't know. Games Workshop is a job you can have at a certain point in your life. I've always said it. You can have it if you're not paying if you're living with somebody who's got a good job, like your partner or whatever, and then yes, you can work for Games Workshop. You can pay your rent, and you're not going to be destitute, no problem. If it's a job that you have as well as something else, like if I was still working for Games Workshop now and they allowed me to still have my YouTube channel, ideal, absolutely ideal. Because the grand or so I make on working for Games Workshop a month after tax, right, can be then combined with the money I make on YouTube, perfect. Yeah. Treating it as your sole job when you've got bills to pay, no, probably not ideal.
Just going back to what you were saying about the community, that's something I can attest to myself as a 8-9-year-old kid. I remember going into Games Workshop in Oxford.
Oh yeah.
And having a Bretonian monopose archer.
Yes.
You know, kind of painting some green on it and putting some grass flock in it.
That would probably be Andy Wheel in those days, our manager. He's a very nice man.
But that
sense of achievement, isn't it?
That experience is something that's lived with me ever since. And I remember, you know, taking that model home with me. Unfortunately, it's lost to time now, but it was something I treasured for such a long time. Even when I kind of left the hobby, I remember having it in a drawer going, oh yeah, I remember that. And, you know, here I am now years later diving back into the hobby.
Yes, well, you've achieved something.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's a great sense of achievement. And the other thing is trying to get young men to read is almost impossible, as we know, and it was so in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
But suddenly they're devouring rule books with rules like, you know, manoeuvrability. They're big words for young lads, and they're destroying these books. Mums and dads say, he's never read a blooming book in his life, and he wants another one. I think, well, there you go. You see, and good for your education.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much to Film Deck Miniatures, and thank you very much to John for doing the video. There are certain parts, I think most of the things I disagree with, quote unquote, that John was talking about, is mainly a generational thing. It's mainly because he's talking about the Games Workshop that he knew back in the day, and a lot of stuff I'm talking about is I'm the generation after him, right, after he's left the company. The people who took his job basically hired me, essentially. So yeah, that was very interesting. Thank you very much for all of you who asked me to cover that. If the video does well and doesn't get struck down for copyright or anything like that, because it was somebody else's video that I'm covering, I will do more of these, absolutely. But thank you very much for watching. That is my take on what John Stallard had to say on his time at Games Workshop. I can do some more with Rick Priestley or Andy Chambers or whatever. But retail was mainly where I worked, so it's what I know of. So anyway, love you all. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Love you a long time. I will speak to you tomorrow for some more Hobby Nightmares. Have a good one. Bye now.